Good afternoon, everyone. I should say good afternoon because for our friends in Hawaii, it's still the morning, but good afternoon to most of you. I'm Steve Grossman. I'm CEO of ICIC, the Initiative for a Competitive Intercity, and I want to welcome the more than 700 small business owners who have registered for this panel discussion entitled Innovating Through Crisis, Strategies for Small Businesses to Survive and Thrive. When the country's going through perhaps our most daunting crisis and survival is the dominant theme, you can't have a better teacher than Lynda Applegate. The Baker Foundation professor at the Harvard Business School, the longtime head of Harvard Business School's flagship executive education program, the OPM, and for many years, the most popular feature of our national conference. Lynda is eminently qualified to talk about innovation and change in a crisis environment. I want to thank our panelists, all Inner City 100 winners. You'll meet them in just a few minutes. Vanessa, Stephanie, Janice, Bo, and David, you do us honor by being with us today. You've done extraordinary things with your careers, and we look forward to hearing what you're doing now. I mentioned that they're Inner City 100 winners. What is the Inner City 100? The Inner City 100 was an urban business initiative started by ICIC 22 years ago. During the 22 years we've been in operation, we've honored more than 1,000 companies nationwide. Every year we recognize the 100 fastest growing inner city businesses in the United States. Those businesses have created that we can document well over 135,000 good paying jobs in the inner cities and under-resourced communities across America. When it comes to the Inner City 100, we're accepting applications right now for the 2020 program, which will be announced in November. So after this discussion, we'll send each of you the deck that Lynda has prepared. So don't worry about missing something, because you'll get the deck by the end of this week with all the slides. We'll also be sending you information about how to apply for the Inner City 100 or to nominate a rapidly growing business in your network. There are a lot of people and organizations I'd like to thank. First of all, once again, to Lynda and the 5 panelists. To the Chevron Corporation, which has been our longest serving sponsor of our national conference and the Inner City 100 program, going back 20 plus years. To the FedEx Corporation in Memphis, both principal sponsors of the national conference and of our Inner City 100 awards program. To Fortune magazine, that annually publishes the list of the Inner City 100 and promotes them and features them the day of the national conference. We want to appreciate particularly their media sponsorship over many years. And finally, I want to thank my colleagues, Mike Shore and V. Mai. They run our data strategy and integration team. This was their idea along with Lynda. They socialized it, discussed it, came up with this idea, and 720 people said, absolutely. Finally, I just want to give a plug for ICIC's other resources. If you want to take a look at our Small Business Resource Center, that's packed with information about webinars and other information, just go to icic.org. That's icic.org. Click on Learn More, and the Small Business Resource Center will open up to you. Without any further delay, it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce my dear friend, Harvard Business School professor, Lynda Applegate.
Well, thank you, Steve. It is wonderful to be here, and thank you to the whole team that helped to put this together. I'm thrilled to be talking with you today and talking about a really important topic. A lot of people, Steve was saying, a lot of people think, how can I survive this crisis? And what I'd like to talk about, what the panel will be talking about, is how do you not just survive, but actually start to think about how you can accelerate through that crisis and thrive in the end. And so this is the discussion we're going to have. I'd love to thank the panelists. I've spent tons of time with them, getting to know their businesses, etc. And you're in for a real treat. So I'm going to go quickly through some opening stuff, and then we're going to get right to the panel. First, we're doing a survey. I'm doing it with Harvard Business School, and I'm doing it with a number of other places. And ICIC will be doing it with all of you. And it's a survey on the global health crisis of 2020 and what's the impact been. And so right now we've got a poll, and I'd just like to kind of get a sense for where you're all at. So here's the poll, and we're going to launch it here. Can all of you think through what was your business like in December 31st, 2019? How would you have characterized it? Let's do this real quickly. And then we're going to also characterize, you can scroll through, and then how would you characterize your business performance shortly after COVID-19 impacted your business? And then how would you characterize your business performance today? Okay. And I'll show some of the results, and they're starting to come in. You can see them on your screen. Okay. And we can see that, you know, some people started really strong and went kind of negative and now are starting to get stronger again. Some people started really strong and then they're neutral, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different results that are coming in. I'm going to close the poll in just a minute. You'll have a chance to take the poll later on, but I'll close it for now. And here's the results that we've gotten so far. People, you know, mostly positive and some strongly positive. Right after, all of a sudden, all those positives go down. And then we see some people are starting to come back. That's what we want to talk about, okay? That's what we want to talk about now, is how does this happen? And how do you think about being able to respond immediately, you know, and stabilize the crisis, you know, your current business? And then are there opportunities to actually leverage what you do, your strategic position, your products, your markets, your customers, all the capabilities you have to execute? And that's what the panel will be starting to talk about. And then when we get toward the end, we'll say, how do you think about anticipating the future? What makes this crisis difficult? More difficult than those of you who lived through the 2008 to 2010 global financial crisis, more different than the dot-com crisis, more different than the other crisis that we've lived through since I was born in the late 40s, don't do the math. So I've lived through quite a few, okay? What's different about this one is that it's a health crisis first, where safety and security of people is the primary presenting problem. It's not an economic problem to start. And so how we think about letting, you know, saving people and keeping from the death toll from rising any higher, while also not totally destroying the economy, is really, really tough. It's one of the hardest things we've had to deal with. Okay, and so that's what we're going to talk about. How do we think about that? And I've got, as I say, a wonderful panel to talk about it. Before we get started, I love this quote. I always start with a quote. This one is from Charles Darwin. He says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones who are most responsive to change." Keep that in mind. I came to Harvard. I was recruited to Harvard. I was teaching at the University of Washington in the School of Medicine in the 70s, after the Vietnam War, and was the director of health services. I was recruited to Harvard to help start a tech innovation group. We don't have time to try to figure out how somebody in medicine got into tech and innovation. But I tell all my MBA students and everyone else, straight paths are boring, okay? That means you're not looking up, not trying to figure out what could be exciting. So anyway, I got here in the early 80s. In the mid 90s, I was part of a senior team that launched our entrepreneurial management unit. And I also ran that unit for many years before I took over, even while I was running all of our executive programs for entrepreneurs and business owners. This definition of entrepreneurial leadership, I think, is really important. And it wasn't mine, it's Howard Stevenson, one of my other co-founders of the department. And this is why I say crisis leadership is entrepreneurial leadership. This is our definition. Entrepreneurship is the relentless pursuit of opportunity without regard to the resources currently controlled. Now, why do I love that definition so much? It has nothing to do with size of company, nothing to do with age of company, nothing to do with what industry you're in, et cetera, et cetera. What it says is, entrepreneurs are opportunity driven. No matter what's going on out there, they're saying, is there a way to find an opportunity in the midst of all this change, no matter what it is? In fact, if things aren't changing, it's harder to be an entrepreneur. It is change that actually provides this opportunity for entrepreneurship. Second of all, you never have the resources when you get started. You always are scrounging. So if you're out there trying to get that small business loan, trying to get the PPP protection plan, et cetera, and you're having lots of problems, that's entrepreneurship. I grew up in Detroit. That's the way we call it when you were born in Detroit. I went to school in the 50s and the 60s. And in the 60s, my first job was working in an emergency room in downtown Detroit in the 60s, okay? Scrounging is the way you get things done. I used to tease when I first got to Harvard, I'm a street fighter from way back. You hired me because of it, not despite it. And so just get used to it because it's never going to change. You've always got to scrounge. And if it doesn't work this way, how do I think about it this way, et cetera? Last, it's relentless. You never get it right the first time. Entrepreneurs are testing constantly, learning constantly. The model I'm going to talk with you about is called learning while doing. Everybody told me when I was starting the entrepreneurial management department at Harvard, you know, entrepreneurs have to be comfortable with failure. I said, wait a minute, I hate to fail, but I love to learn. And if we do know that when we're looking ahead and trying to to pursue opportunity, we're making assumptions about what we think that opportunity will look like, what we think the forecast will be for that opportunity. Those are assumptions. And they've got best case and worst case scenarios around them. They're assumptions. And so the only thing you know with certainty when you get started is the assumptions are wrong. And then what we do is we try to figure out how wrong and where wrong, and can we put safety nets under any critical failure factor. You're going to be hearing from our panelists how she did this to enable her to survive in her regular business. But then now that's what she had to do is, you know, layer in the safety nets. And then finally, it's not reckless. The best entrepreneurs know how to assess and manage risk. And so that's something that we're also going to be talking about. So before I bring up our panelists, one analogy. I use this to start every single one of my executive programs. If any of you have seen me, you know, speak before, you might have seen it. So question, how is leading through crisis like soccer? Okay. And when in the 90s, when I was first launching the entrepreneurial management unit, I also was coaching my 5, 6, 7-year-old son's soccer team, okay? And so I'm sitting on the sideline watching the kids play on the weekend. And then during the week, I'm sitting there helping I was launching the business plan contest. So I would help our MBA students do business plans and they were all doing internet businesses, right? They're all going after internet businesses. Somewhere around 97 or 98, I realized we were playing the same game. Little field, little people, no skills. The coach, who's the ref, puts the ball in the middle of the field, blows a very big whistle, and everybody jumps on the ball. Arms and legs are flying. They don't have a clue what they're going to do with it once they get it. They just know if everybody else is there, that's where they should be there too. Now, every now and then, quite by accident, the ball will come out of the scrum. It looks like a rugby scrum, and they just go all over there. Okay? That's the way the game was played. By the late 97 or 98, anybody who had any way of doing business would know that people would be pitching me these business plans, and they'd all have this hockey stick cash flow curve. And I'd say, help me understand. Whenever you come to one of my programs at Harvard, if I ever say, help me understand, that's my nice way of saying, what are you talking about? Help me understand. If you lose money on every transaction and you do more of them, and they'd say, network effects, Lynda. And I'd say, I'm an economist. I understand network effects. What's the assumptions you're making that all these network effects are going to kick in? And they say, you mean I have to show you? And I go, you have to be able to tell me what the assumptions are so we can back up and then try to manage the uncertainty. That's the way we do it. Keep that in mind. Leading through crisis, I see a lot of people playing like the 5-year-olds. Don't panic. Don't just jump on the ball. How do we start thinking about doing this like a pro? So I didn't get the pros until my son, okay, he got to be a pretty good soccer player. In fact, by the late 90s, early 2000s, he was recruited to the Olympic development team, and my coaching days were over. I actually had the gall to ask the Olympic development team coach if I could help in any way, and he said, the moms sit in the stands. And so when I started watching the pros play, we went to all different countries. I never missed a game in his whole career. You can tell I had him later. He was my gift. We won't go into that either, but he was my gift. And so never missed a game. And when I watched the pros play, all of a sudden I said, that's the way we build businesses, especially in times when everything's uncertain, when there's either a crisis that's changed everything, or there's some new technology that disrupts and says you can, do something very different. So then I started saying, how do I teach people to build businesses like pros? Okay. When you look at how the pros play, it's a big field. It's not just everybody jumping on the ball. When you line up to start a game and the ref blows the whistle, the receiving team, you line up on the midfield, the receiving team passes back, okay? It's a big field of play. There's a whole team with different kinds of skills. So you got your defenders like my son, who was a keeper in more ways than one. You've got your midfielders who are there to start entering a new field of play. That's not the end position, it's the entry to the new field of play. And then you've got your forwards who are out there trying to define what could be these opportunities that we could go after in the future if we can start to move the ball down the field, okay? So they pass back, and you see them taking those little passes in the backfield while they defend their current position and start trying to figure out where an opportunity, where's a white space opportunity where I can start moving the ball down the field. They're looking long, they're looking medium, and they're looking short, but they don't just play the ball at their feet, right? Innovating through crisis is a lot like that, okay? If you are on a soccer team and you pass back and you're looking around and you think something's going to go well, so you pass to this one thing and the other team comes down, they pass back, pivot, and cross the field. If you see some big opportunities there and you can get something to a midfielder, that's when they start engaging the forwards who can really start going after that opportunity and figuring out what that path is all about. Keep that in mind. It requires creativity and very fast cycled learning while doing. It also requires passion, perseverance, teamwork, and trust. During crisis, you need to be able to have that. You also need to have people who are defending your current position. And then who are those people that can actually try to help you understand what are some of those near-term opportunities that allow me to start moving the ball down the field. Moving the ball down the field while still protecting your current position. If you start getting some traction on some of those opportunities, who are those forwards that can actually help you accelerate through the traction? And then, or the midfielders that can help you accelerate, go through the traction, accelerate. And then who are the forwards? What do you think it's going to look like afterwards? How do you start engaging your forwards to help you anticipate what the future will look like after the crisis is over? So here's your game plan. I actually give every one of my business owners and entrepreneurs a game plan to take home, whether it's they're trying to go after opportunities or whether or not they're managing crisis. During 2006 to 8, we did a lot of crisis management. How do you stabilize and defend your current position? Engaging your team to read the field. Identifying those immediate dangers and mobilizing the expertise and resources needed to survive those, to surround and take care of those. How do you communicate clearly and often? How can you be honest and yet still inspiring and engaging so people want to keep playing? And how do you learn and respond quickly? How do you accelerate through that crisis? Are there some opportunities really near in where you can leverage your current positioning, not going way out here, but leverage your current positioning and all those capabilities and expertise that you have? Can you engage the midfield to start pursuing those opportunities so that you can do those experiments and pass back and cross the field? And when you are learning while you're doing it, and once you achieve traction, can you accelerate through crisis? Okay. And then finally, how do you anticipate the future and transform? How do you use the insights you're gaining as you're accelerating through the crisis and you're stabilizing and defending your core and accelerating to actually envision what are some of the possible scenarios that could happen? Okay, how do we recognize there's tremendous uncertainty in those and actually think about what are some of the assumptions I'm making and how do I start to really understand whether those assumptions are right or wrong? How do I engage my forwards when I'm ready to begin exploring these future opportunities? And then how do you manage uncertainty and risk as you enter the new field of play? At the end, you're going to get all this. I saw somebody said, how do we think about, the future? This is you're going to get all these slides and you'll get this whole thing going forward. People are asking about risk. Risk management is critical and we're going to talk about it. Think what assumptions I'm making when I'm doing, are things working or not? If not working, how do I, step back and pivot or experiment and learn while doing? Now let's hear from our panel. Okay, so Janice is our first panelist. I'm going to ask Janice to go first. So Janice, turn on your mic, turn on your picture.
Hi.
Okay, can everybody see Janice? There she is. Hi, Janice. Janice Jucker is president and co-owner of Three Brothers Bakery. And this was a family bakery that it opened in Poland around 1825. So we're talking a long-term family business. During World War II, her family survived the concentration camps, and they came to the United States and opened Three Brothers Bakery in Houston on May 8th, 1949. 4 years after World War II Liberation Day on May 8th, 1945. So Janice, let's go ahead and get started. First, tell people how you would rate yourself.
So I just have to say one thing. Tomorrow is our 71st anniversary.
Oh!
So if anyone out there is in Houston, we have 71-cent cookies. And if not, you can donate to
Oh, that is so cool. So that's fun. Well, I wanted to start with you because you have a really, in fact, all the panelists do, but I love this inspiring story about the crisis you went through. And then later on the next slide, we're going to talk about surviving crisis, okay? So how would you rate your business performance in these 3 survey timeframes right now? And back in December 31st, shortly after, and then today. So tell everybody just, where would you put yourself?
Okay, so December 31st, we were rocking and rolling. We felt like we had finally kind of gone over the hill from previous disasters. Then the COVID-19 came, and immediately we were down at the very bottom. Things were really bad, yes. And then now we've instituted some programs and things are better. We're lucky because we are not a bar. Thank God every day. I feel sorry for those people because we could stay open. We're a retail bakery, and our model, we have 3 stores, and our model is more you walk in, you see what you want, you get it, and you leave. So it's more like a grocery store. So we're able to stay open.
Okay, so you told us a little bit about the bakery, if there's anything more, but what were the immediate challenges? How did you go from rocking and rolling to, you know, really struggling? And then on the next one, we'll start about, you know, what's happened to help you turn that around. So what were the immediate challenges and opportunities you faced after COVID first came? And then how do you address them and address the challenges, pursue the opportunities?
Well, I think one thing you have to know about us, and I don't know, I can't see any slides, so I don't know if there's any slides up there or not. One thing you need to know about us, my husband and I call ourselves the king and queen of disasters because we've been through 4 floods, a fire, and a hurricane. And I think we'll survive this pandemic. And I think we were kind of ahead of the game because we've been through so many disasters. So our GM, COO, he was already worrying about it at the end of January, beginning of February. We were going on vacation, so I chose not to do that until we got home. And when we got home, that hit the fan. And so we immediately had to figure out what we were going to do. We knew that before we had to be conserving cash, so we were getting ready with that. So one of the things we've learned from previous disasters and solidified during Hurricane Harvey, and that is what it takes to recover from a disaster. And for us, we see it as 4 parts. The people. You need to pay your employees. It's really important to pay your team and give them security. Let them know that you're there for them. Also, when you're ready to reopen, if you don't have your team in place, then it's going to be really hard. And I think some of the people now are actually seeing that. It's getting hard to get the people back. The other thing is you need money and you need cash in the bank to pay the employees. You can't put that on a credit card, but you can put a lot of other stuff on a credit card. So you need some kind of short-term money, and then you need big money. So that's going to cover all those payrolls, all the rent, all the commodities you might need to buy. Your insurance is probably a big number for you. So you have to have a lot of cash eventually for that, because not all of that can be put on a credit card. Where are you going to get that? And so I started immediately. I went to my home office, and all I did was focus on getting our financials in order, because I knew that we were going to need to get some kind of a loan, because we just simply don't have $500,000 laying around in the bank. So I knew something would happen too with the government. I knew they were going to offer something. I didn't know what that something was, but I knew all my financials had to be in order. And then in order to finally recover, you've gone through those first 2 steps. Then the third step is what about your assets in order to reopen? What are those? In this case, in other disasters, we had 4.5 feet of water with Hurricane Harvey. That's the equipment, the assets, equipment, the vans. And so we're lucky we're large enough. We have about 57 people. And some of the key people, we know what our jobs are. So my husband does all the assets, all the capital equipment. And my GM and the assistant GM, they're getting the place cleaned up and ready to reopen. And I do money and insurance and PR and marketing. In this case, the assets are your team, your customer, and your lawmakers. And you need to communicate with all of them. And I put a big star also about that lawmaker thing, because it's really important that you know your lawmakers prior to a disaster, not after a disaster, because you do need them. And it's really nice when you can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, can you help me? And they respond. So those are probably your 3 biggest assets. And you need to, again, be communicating with them. And then clean up and return to operation. And that's kind of what we're seeing now a little bit for some of the businesses. You need to communicate throughout with your customers. Let them know what's going on. My hair salon, he never sent emails. He's been so great about telling us what is going on. And I think he did a really great job. And then the other thing is, when you're in a disaster, you need money from outside of the disaster zone to come in, because you're in a financially devastated area. Well, in this case, this one is so much worse because the entire world is a disaster zone. So where are you going to get that money? So you have to think of some new ideas. And so more than ever, my part in this, the money, the PR, the marketing, there was no real insurance on this one. That's really, it's a full-time job for me. That's all I do. We got the PPP funds, it's marketing, PR, and lawmakers now, and communicating with the customers. That's all I do all day, every day. And just to tell you like some of the ideas, our pecan pie business doubled during the Christmas holiday. And so we decided we were going to put a lot of focus on that. And then when we had a lot of media coverage, thank God. And during one of the pieces, it came to me that if everybody bought a pecan pie, think about how it would affect our whole bakery ecosystem, the pecan grower, the box maker, the tin maker, the sugar, the flour, all these people outside of our business. So I'm working to try to keep our people employed. But in the meantime, let's also try to keep our vendors employed. And so nothing says you love someone more than a pecan pie from Three Brothers Bakery. So I just wanted to put that plug in. And then the other thing from that was people started mailing us money and saying, bake for people who need food. And so we got quite a bit of money. And so we formalized it and we've launched it. It's kind of in concert with our 71st anniversary. And we call them mitzvah funds, good deed funds. And you can actually donate money. It's not tax deductible, but you put money in one of our funds and then we give that money to charity and people who are feeding those in need. And they can use that as a wholesale account. So actually we're giving back too, because then their dollars are going further. And then our son and daughter-in-law said, hey, they live way far away. We don't deliver out there, way far away. And they said, what if we took orders and then we picked it up and then took it out there and distributed it for you? We're like, great. And so it's working. This is our third week doing it. And we give them a commission. And then so each week we've added a neighborhood, and then we started with another person this week too, doing it in a completely different area. So this might actually be a model, I think, that could continue from all of this. And sadly, I think the mitzvah funds are going to continue, and it's always a good time to buy a pecan pie, always. So
there's never a bad time.
And then I just wanted to say one more thing. In order to prepare, everyone, and I'm sure if we put up a poll now, which we won't do, and I said, how many of you have read your insurance policies cover to cover? Maybe 10 of these 700 people, whoever's here, would say they had. And it is better than a sleeping pill, and you need to read it before the disasters happen, because you will find that it can help you, and you'll find what's missing and go back and get that. So I highly recommend that. And if there is any media on this call, I would love to talk to you about why holders of SBA disaster loans from previous disasters did not get debt forgiveness like those who have 504 and 7A loans. So that's my last little plug. So anyway.
Thank you very much. And so one of the things that, just to, you know, one of the things you see is entrepreneurial leadership in action and new ideas for how we can go to maybe not our current market, but to an adjacent market, the people out in the suburbs, and use a delivery service. You told me when we were talking one time that you're also selling flour and, you know, other kinds of, you know, supplies. And then keeping in mind that ecosystem. Janice, can you see the slides now? While you were talking, I stopped sharing and then started it again.
Yes.
Now you can see it. Good, good. I was hoping so. By the way, there's a few people asking questions. What I'd like you to do is keep asking questions on the Q&A screen. We're gonna have a Q&A time. So Mike Shore is from ICIC is keeping track of those. So if you have questions, put them down there and we'll get to that later. But thank you, Janice. Good way to start this discussion. So our next person is Stephanie Hickman. Stephanie, unmute your microphone and come on in. Stephanie is the president and CEO of Trice Construction. Trice was founded in 1967 in Chicago by the Trice family. And at the time it was founded, it was a small residential construction company. And it stayed that way until it was acquired by Stephanie. Stephanie bought it. She'd been an attorney and she decided she wanted to be a business owner. So she bought Trice Construction and she's transformed it into a really high growth concrete construction and energy utility infrastructure firm. So, Stephanie, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Start
Thank
by
you, Lynda.
just telling us where you would have rated yourself in December, shortly after the crisis hit, and then today.
Well, in December, I would have rated us strongly positive. We were, planning for rapid growth. We were busy with projects, expanding a little bit of our scope of work that we were doing, taking on larger projects. And we had a strong backlog of work under contract coming into 2020. So we were really positive.
And then what happened right after?
Well, right after, as it hit, we had a momentary, I guess we would fall into that neutral to negative category because we were watching what was happening in other parts of the country as the pandemic was expanding, and we saw that construction was being shut down, that sites in particular in Boston were closing. So we were very concerned about what would happen just as the pandemic was becoming clear. And
what's happened today?
Well, today we're even more positive than we were at the end of the year. So our outlook has changed, not only because we had that backlog of projects, but it's over this time period, these last several weeks, we've had opportunities to really build stronger relationships with our clients, our key clients. It's allowed us to reinforce those relationships and gives us an opportunity to do what you talked about earlier, kind of stabilizing and defending our core.
Mm-hmm. So you've really hunkered down. You've got projects. Your projects are long-term projects and they're government. Who are your customers? Tell them about your customer base.
Yeah, so our customers include major utilities that are often Fortune 500 companies. We work for the top 100 general contractors in the area. And we also work for the city of Chicago and other infrastructure contractors. So our work involves utility work, such as working inside live electrical substations. We're rebuilding manholes as part of underground distribution systems, and we're constructing foundations for buildings throughout the Chicago region.
Okay. Now, this is your project that you just talked about. When you acquired Trice in 2006, it was a small family-owned construction business. And then 2008 hit to 2010, while you were trying to transform it from a small residential construction business into this, energy, utilities, government contracts, big company, customers. You did that through, you were transforming through the crisis. What did you learn during that process that you could share with people?
Growing through an economic crisis, sometimes it's good, the things you don't know. We were learning while doing, as you described earlier. And one of the things we did initially, after I purchased the business, was to define what of our legacy services that we were able to provide to utility clients. My background was in utilities, and how could we leverage that experience? So I learned that, but one of the smarter things I think we did is that we anchored the business in the infrastructure area, utility infrastructure, other infrastructure projects. So that was an important part that allowed us to grow. During that financial crisis, there were still multi-billion-dollar capital programs that utilities were pursuing. The infrastructure in the country, we all know, is aging, and that work had to continue. And what we've learned from that is we're doubling down now in that industry because, we all hear about what's happening at a state and federal level, and infrastructure is key to, helping the country return and stabilize from an economic basis. So that industry is largely unaffected by COVID-19. And what we've done when I bought the business was to transform into that area. Right now, we're spending time with, and immediately after, the announcement of stay-at-home orders, and knowing that we were essential business, we've been in contact with all of our clients. We're offering additional services. We're looking at how we can expand our core. We're prompting them to, I've got one client where they've been considering a capital program for some time, but now that, I know there's some projects they have to defer, that this is something that could be pulled forward. And so we're offering services in that way. With people at home, there's less traffic, there's fewer pedestrians. And so we've offered to be able to come on to existing projects, add some capacity for them so that they can accelerate during a time when there's less impediment to getting the work done.
And that ability Stephanie, that ability to actually help the customer know, for you to suggest to them opportunities they could pursue that would add value to them, and that allows you to help them accelerate through the crisis, is really important. That's really cool.
Yeah, and of course, one of the other things we learned during our transformation that we're applying now is that relationships matter. Building, nurturing, leveraging, and because we're in an industry that may see a lot of new entrants now, we've got to defend those relationships. So it was important to us in the growth phase, and it's even more important now during this crisis.
Yeah.
And being open to adding new competencies to support the clients, adding that new capacity really was fuel for our growth back then. It's fuel for our growth right now. So whether that be organic growth through acquisitions, through adding new services, really it's back to the future for us in many ways. And those clients that we started off with during the financial crisis a decade ago are the same ones that we will rely on even now through this crisis and beyond. The doubling down and rebuilding those relationships. I'm talking to them more now than before the crisis, and I think that's added huge value for us as a company, and allowed us to kind of reinforce with the clients that we are there for them. That's been our key message. Trice is open for business, and we're here to help.
That's fantastic. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Now, Bo, come on up, Bo. Come to the front. Turn your microphone on, and there's Bo. Hi, Bo. Bo Menkiti is the founder and CEO of the Menkiti Group, he founded this company. Bo is an entrepreneur. He was an independent agent in real estate, and then founded his own company, the Menkiti Group, and it's an integrated real estate services firm. Dedicated, what I love about this, dedicated to enhancing the fabric of life in America's urban neighborhoods through strategic development, management, and sale of both residential and commercial real estate, and really looking at transition neighborhoods that are in transition. He also owns and operates a regional residential brokerage business called Keller Williams Capital Properties, and he's committed to transforming lives, social impact. He's got a scorecard that looks not only at the customers and what impact he's doing on the outside, but he also is looking at his employees and everything that he's building on the inside, both, and building a really good business with this. So here you are, really, kind of rolling and rocking. Where were you in December 31st, 2019? And then what happened shortly after, and where are you today?
Yeah, I think, in December 2000 and December 31st, 2019, we were really looking ahead. We were going through the metamorphosis of an organization on our journey as we continue to grow, and how we were going to go to the next phase of that journey and the next level of that journey. So we were positive. We had an outlook of growth. We were trying to move forward. I think when we first started dealing with the crisis, everybody just kind of froze for a second. There was a sort of, what's going on? What's happening? How do we respond? And then we moved really quickly into action. As we moved into action, it's been really interesting. They say that sort of a crisis they sort of expose us to stuff. We actually start to see what's working about the business, what's not. So the first thing we did was we sort of focused on our mindset and what was going on, how we're going to look at this situation. And we quickly realized that sort of fear is the enemy, and we've got to keep fear out of the conversation. That we've got to mind our mindset, that we've got to be level-headed. There's real safety and human concerns here that we've got to be thoughtful about and cognizant of. We also have to be level-headed about it. And we've got to see the opportunities that exist, not just the challenges, right, and what's going on. And then we said, look, people need us now more than ever. We are the connective tissue. In our business, we're either building things, building buildings, we're managing property and supporting mostly small business tenants, retail tenants, or we're supporting entrepreneurs, real estate agents, brokers who are these small businesses. And so people need us now more than ever. How do we step into this? How do we lean into this? How do we realize that if we're going to be part of our communities, we can do a lot with that? And then we said, look, we've got to communicate. There's all sorts of things going on. The world is moving really, really fast. How do we stay in communication with each other? In our brokerage, we went to daily company-wide Zooms with over 1,000 people. We're on the Zoom communicating with 1,000 people every day, just for a short period of time. We're giving the daily stats, let them know that homes are still selling. Let them know there's still things going on. We're shouting out positivity, and we're getting this daily communication channel going. That was probably one of the best things that could have happened for our organization. And then finally, we're trying to stay connected. We're physically connected, so we had to figure out how to stay connected. And for us, that was everything from virtual coffee hours. We actually have a water cooler, 15 minutes, people get in, they do these mind games on the computer with each other. We've had a bunch of virtual happy hours. So just trying to find ways that people can stay connected during that time, and how we can stay connected with our community and with our clients and our customers in this time when they're going through this important time. Our perspective on it was sort of that if we could stay connected with them, it would go. So there were three things we focused on. We focused on, number one, we had to cut costs. Number one was cut costs so we can make it through.
Don't run out of money, right? Yeah. That's the primary thing.
Yeah? We had to cut costs. Number two, we got to secure revenue. We got to ensure that the contracts and business that we have actually gets across the finish line, and we don't let everyone just stop and go hide in a corner because something happened. So we got to secure revenue. And then number three, once we've cut costs and secured revenue, we got to plant seeds for the future. We got to think about what happens here, They always say sometimes the seeds that we plant in the darkness actually sprout when the light comes back. So if we're in a dark time, if we're in a challenging time, we want to be planting seeds for the future. So when we get out of this time, we're able to have something that can grow and that can be harvested. So that was kind of the thought. As we've gotten into this, as we're now 8 weeks in and we're moving and we're that urgency, right? It's hard to sustain that urgency. The last piece I'd say is just crisis exposes us. It exposes you. Crisis exposes you. It exposes, it exposes your thinking, it exposes your heart, it exposes your models, your systems, your people, your actions, your money, right? And you're sort of laid bare. And so on the positive side, we've learned where a lot of the holes are in our business. We've dug in, we've focused, and we've learned places where our processes need work. So it's been, an interesting time.
So I changed to your second slide here and I love this picture, needless to say. So Bo, in addition to being an entrepreneur, et cetera, he also was a professional ice hockey player. Since I grew up in Detroit, I actually used to play ice hockey too. So I really, I never played soccer, but I did play ice hockey, and it's a lot of the same kind of passion and passing back and twisting and stuff like that. So Bo, and now you're coaching your son too. I love that little picture right there in the front. So Bo, what did you learn from your years of playing professional sports that helped you become a successful entrepreneurial leader as you built your company into such a successful high growth business that is committed to the people, the passion, and the purpose? And most importantly, when you were talking about what you learned while doing and how you were able to get underneath and let's keep positive, but let's figure out, where are the holes? How do we think about the revenue? How do we think about the cost? How do we, et cetera, et cetera. How did sports actually play a role there?
Well, I think, one of the first benefits, I think, of sports, I've always thought that as an entrepreneur, we go through these phases of growth of the business, right? And first is sort of, I do it, and I'm doing everything, and I do it all myself. And then we move into this sort of we do it phase where we're working together, working collaboratively. And if the business is going to grow, we at some point have to move into a they do it phase. And if it's going to succeed over generations, we got to move into theirs, where it becomes theirs, where it becomes somebody else's. And so sports gave me a head start because I was all about we do it from a very young age. I was always playing sports. I was always captain. And that actually served me really well. But I realized actually fairly far into my professional career that I was what had gotten me there wasn't going to get me to that next level. And I had to sort of evolve that. So one thing sports gave me was a great teamwork framework from which to work. But the other thing it did is I was talking to someone the other day and they said, operating your business in a crisis is kind of like being in an emergency room, right? Kind of like being in an emergency room. And I said, well, it's actually kind of just like ice hockey, right? They said there are these 5 things and you got to have extreme focus and intensity. You got to have focus and intensity, number 1. You got to be constantly monitoring the vital signs. You got to be monitoring what's happening, what's going on, right? You got to be in constant communication. You're going there, who's going there, what's going there? You have to have massive flexibility to changing conditions. In sports, the field's always changing. The players are moving. The context is changing, right? And then finally, the speed of response matters. When you're in an ER, the speed of response matters. So I think one of the things we learn from sports is how you operate in a team environment under intense pressure with rapidly changing conditions. And that's actually what we're in today, right?
I love it. Thank you. And that learning while doing and the creativity that's required to solve problems, or, as you see an opportunity there. Let's hear from David. David, open your mic.
Hello, Lynda.
On. Hi, David. How are you? Our next speaker, David Nuys, founder and CEO of Endonics. He also is the co-founder, co-owner, and now a board member of PTI QCS. And that's he's founded the QTICS in Detroit, Michigan. No, he founded it in Mexico. It's currently headquartered in Detroit. Okay. So in 2017, what PTI QCS does is they assemble components and, for the automakers. So they get a lot of suppliers giving them piece of components for the assembly, and then they give the component to the automakers, and they then assemble the car. So I can really relate to this, since I used to work at Ford Motor Company in the 60s when I was putting myself through college. So I can see the factory in action, et cetera, et cetera. And it was through that you actually decided that the quality, you really needed a better coordination system to go all the way from the supplier through PTI-QCS and to the automaker to actually streamline the coordination and management of those quality control systems. And so in 2019, that was where Andonics came from. In 2019, you spun it out as a separate company and closed his first round of funding right before the crisis started. Good deal. You know, you got the money before it started. And what just before he comes in, what I love is that Andonics automates frontline work. So the manufacturing line in industrial age companies through a technology platform that connects people, process, and place. It's to empower frontline workers, not to replace them. So tell us a little bit about your performance in Andonics and PTI-QCS in December, late December 2019. What were the immediate challenges you faced after the COVID crisis came in? And then, you know, what's it like today?
Yeah, thank you, Lynda. I have the benefit of having a little Lynda here on my side because I was an OPM 50 alumnus, so I have that unfair advantage. So last year was fantastic. It was amazing for PTI and for Andonics. Andonics basically moved from a startup to a scale up as we were closing the year with over $1 million in deal value in our pipeline. As you mentioned, we wanted to test our value proposition with institutional investors. So we decided to go for a test funding round, and we wanted to raise only $500,000 just to see if the problem we wanted to solve was important enough for institutional investors. We were very, very surprised and very fortunate to be oversubscribed, and we ended up raising $1.2 million. Without that money, I would say Andonics would be in tremendous trouble right now. And then PTI, we were actually enjoying a decade of amazing market demand. We positioned PTI to be a key player on the pickup trucks and SUVs. So we supply almost components to every single one of those pickup trucks, the F-150s, the Sierras, the Silverados, the Rams. So we were enjoying that growth. And then we basically have in our supply chain all the sensorics, all the processors that all these new autonomous and electrical vehicles need. So we were basically shipping to every single assembly plant in the country. If you're building a car in this country, in America, we were almost sending you something daily. So that was the world before this pandemic. When in February, by the end of February, I was in Mexico and I was flying back with my co-founder in Andonics, Oliver, and we noticed very quickly how our industry was going to be impacted. Andonics has benefited from solving the problems that I face being a manufacturer, being in supply chain. So we basically source all the problems that we wanted to solve with technology to bring digitization to the industry. But the problem is that our blessings to solve these problems became our worst nightmare, because as you guys know, automotive was not declared as essential business. So worldwide, the automotive industry shut down, and Andonics and PTI depend on that market to thrive. So that is the first challenge that we needed to solve. And that became, again, the #1 problem for PTI, to immediately position, basically take the playbook from 2008 and thinking, okay, I have a baseline to iterate from crisis management. And for Andonics was basically detecting the problem of how do we get companies back to work and people safely back to work after money and demands, being able to send people back to work safely, and so companies can be open and stay open, was critical for PTI and for endonics. So that's the problem that we wanted to solve right away, and we jump into that. This problem was not exclusive of PTI or automotive. There are 25 million workers that don't have the choice to work from home, so we can keep the lights on and keep food on our table. So we immediately positioned endonics to solve that problem, and that's where we came up with Safely, which is basically a technology platform that has been prepackaged with health containment initiatives to keep people safe. We figured out how to give that away for free, because the small and medium businesses that are essential to the supply chain are the ones that are impacted the most. And obviously helping PTI take all their people back to work safely. We have about 2,000 team members in Mexico, US, and Brazil. And then the auto industry itself, 8.5 million. So this is our last 60 days have been about deploying this technology. We've also found other sectors of the economy, like essential businesses, food processing, food manufacturing, even school and churches that benefit from this technology. And so we went very quickly from being a negative to at least a neutral in PTI. And now for endonics, our demand just went to the roof.
So you were able to leverage your current positioning and your product offering, et cetera. It was a technology platform, so that made it easier then to be able to build on the Safely, technology platform. But then with that, you were able to really expand the playing field that you were on, and actually now go into all different kinds of businesses that need to have need to have people come back together again safely.
Correct. So we basically identified the problem and the need, and we came up with what we call a triple play. A is the technology with Safely Pass to immediately deploy, monitoring, detecting, and basically preventing spreads at work. That's number one mission critical, not having team members being infected at work. So the technology helps you deploy that really quickly and for free. But then the second thing is we need to make sure we provide what we call the Blue Army with personal protection equipment. So we partner up with PTI to source manufacturing capabilities in India, Mexico, and coming soon Detroit for about 10 million face masks that we will only sell to small and medium companies at wholesale prices so they can keep their people safe. And then we partner up with telehealth and healthcare companies to enhance and augment companies, and so they can treat, diagnose, and monitor employees at their work centers. So that is basically how we were able to partner up with PTI, solving a problem that was only apparent to PTI, basically became a solution that we could deploy at the scale at other sectors in Mexico, US, and Canada.
That's excellent. Thank you. And that's that leverage. So keep that in mind as we go to our final panelist, Vanessa Faggiolly, who is the co-founder and CFO of Amerisal Foods. Open your mic, open your video, Vanessa, and come to the front. Vanessa and her mom actually bought a bankrupt import-export firm in 2008. At the time of the crisis, they bought the firm and renamed it Amerisal Foods. What the firm did is imported food from El Salvador, from Nicaragua, and then sold it in a very huge growing market that was a US market that's really would love authentic, nostalgic Latin America food from home. Shortly after a crisis, they acquired it, the crisis hit, and with only one employee at the time, the mother-daughter team performed every role in the company, you know, from driving the delivery vans to dealing with the suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. But by 2019, the company now has several suppliers from each of its products that it imports from El Salvador and Nicaragua. It also bought its own brand, Perla, brought a brand, which now has become a household brand for the Central American communities. And its products are sold in large and small retailers and on Instacart and the company website. So, Vanessa, how would you rate your performance at Amerisal Foods in December 2019, at the end of December, shortly after the COVID, and then today? And what were some of the immediate challenges you faced, and how did you address them? And what any opportunities?
Okay. Can you hear me good, Lynda?
I can hear you just
Perfect.
fine.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And right by December 31st, our company was doing very positive. We were increasing in sales. Shortly after COVID-19, we were strongly positive. And today we're still strongly positive. So a little bit of what I do, we import food products from Latin America, and we distribute to supermarket chains. Right when COVID-19 hit over here around, it was the second week of March in California, people were panic shopping at supermarket chains. And we were barely keeping up with the demand. It was just incredible. And what we did with my mom is we addressed the problem and we acted immediately. We said, okay, what do we need to do to survive and thrive? Because we import food products from other countries, and that's a big risk. So what we did is that we leveraged our position, we leveraged our relationship, and that gave us the capability to implement new opportunities and develop the ones we were already working with. A new opportunity was 2 years ago, we started making product here, proudly manufacturing product in the US. We have something, Lynda, in place at the business that's called safety nets. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that, because in Latin America, you know, it's doing business abroad can be very risky. So we like to anticipate and we like to forecast those critical failure factors. That's why we said, you know what, we're going to manufacture product here in the US. We're going to manufacture product in Nicaragua. We're going to manufacture in El Salvador. We had an issue that the manufacturing in El Salvador completely shut down as the third week of March, and we were able to move full production to Nicaragua and United States, and that was what has kept our business afloat. The demand for our products is just incredibly steady on a rise, and that anticipating the failure, the critical failure factors, really gave us an advantage over our competitors, because most of my competitors have their supermarket shelves empty, and we're the only ones that have fully stocked, because we were able to leverage different manufacturing companies in different countries.
So one of the things, so you were able to, you had always had risk in your supply chain.
Yes.
And so because of that, you learned that I can't do this business unless I have backups. We Correct. Call them safety nets. And those are the things that I have to make sure that I've got a safety net under any critical failure factor. So when the crisis came, your supply chain, couldn't keep up. But you had already started putting these in place. Very interesting, very interesting. So tell them what you're thinking about now, okay? And so when you look ahead, is this ever gonna go back to normal? When do you expect your business environment to go back to normal? And what are you thinking about now in terms of your business?
I am actually a person that I look forward to change. I do not believe we're going to go back to normal. There's going to be a new normal now, and we're going to adapt to the new reality that we're going to live in, whether we like it or not. It's just part of life, part of business, part of everything. We are looking at stabilizing and increasing our production and our manufacturing of made in the US. And servicing our clients, expanding, bringing in new items. Now that people are, it has reduced a little bit of panic shopping, but they're still shopping a lot. So we're introducing a lot of new lines of products. So we're having great opportunities and increasing our connections over here in the US for manufacturing, because it's very, doing business abroad can be very risky.
Any of the other panel, by the way, all of you at home, this will be on the survey when you get it from ICIC, but actually thinking about, you know, when will it come back to normal, and will normal look like it does now, or will it look like something different? And Vanessa just, you know, kind of said she thinks it's going to be different. And so she's now trying to look down the field and try to figure out what this new normal will be, but she thinks it's going to mean that they have to have a better control and have, you know, critical failure factors. Janice.
Correct. So one of the things that we know from all the disasters we've been through is that it does take 18 months to start seeing, you know, you're kind of going like this, and then finally you're going to get over that hill. And that's where we were with this pandemic. And this one, though, is going to be a little bit different because for some people, for instance, the lack of travel might actually work in our favor this summer. So we might actually do a little better than we would have normally. And then obviously for the travel and hospitality industry, this could be a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I think the difference with this disaster is just, you don't know when is the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Bo?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, at first the question is like, what's normal? You know, I don't think.
Yeah, what is normal? Yeah.
I have no idea what normal is. I've never been normal. But going back to, you know, when do we return to normal? I think really the question becomes, when do we, I don't believe we're going to return to the way things were before. It's going to be different. But I think the question becomes, when are we going to return to a stable operating environment? We're going from an environment right now there's a lot of uncertainty. It's changing daily. It's up and down. So at some point, that has to start to stabilize into something that people can depend on a little bit more. I think, though, even in a new world, there's going to be this new uncertainty that was never there before, which is that there could be a time, you know, once we've now broken the seal on this idea of just shutting down the world, there's going to be potentially could be times in the future, respikes of this pandemic or others that come along that then have this shutdown. This actually becomes a tool for managing issues. And so I think we have to think about our business in the future very much about how can we survive what is potentially a less predictable environment, especially over the next 18 months, but definitely moving beyond that. What would happen if there are future shutdowns? How do we have a continuity plan in place to move through that?
Just the way as Vanessa had to anticipate that her supply chain might be impacted because it was coming from areas of the world that were not as stable. That you think everybody's going to start having to do that. Very interesting. David and Stephanie, do any of you want to come in with?
Yeah, I think the new normal, it's exactly what we call it. And what is certain right now is that every crisis brings opportunity. And what we're seeing is that this crisis is going to change the way we work and the way we behave socially, just like 9/11 changed our travel industry. And what we need to learn quickly is just like when you have a hurricane and goes through a disaster area, you don't go back to build the same home that got destroyed. You don't go back to build the same dam that failed. You upgrade your construction standards and you upgrade your engineering to build something resilient. what I'm seeing right now is that business leaders and business community leaders are actually building those playbooks and saying, what do we need to do? Not if, but when this happens again, we are not caught off guard. And I see that a lot of these answers are going to stay. And I think that trying to innovate, anticipate, and like you said, adapt will help us get there quickly and move on with our lives and get this economy going. How fast we are to do that is going to basically define when can we see a recovery in our economy.
Okay, Stephanie, very quickly, because I want to go now to questions. We got questions coming in and we want to have a little bit of time for questions. Stephanie?
Yes, we'll never return to what was normal. You know, we can't even anticipate how things will continue to evolve in this environment. You know, so for us, we're looking at internally, how do we be more agile? You know, how do we leverage remote working? How do we, you know, continue to build these relationships to address the change? So I think this will be, you know, an evolution over time. No new normal. I think it will be dynamic, certainly throughout the next 18 to 24 months.
Okay. Thank you very much to the panel. If we were all here, we'd be giving you a big hand. That was very helpful. I'm going to skip a couple slides, okay, so we can get to the question and answer. I do want to say that we will be giving you all of these slides, okay? We were going to talk a little bit about managing uncertainty, but I think the panel covered it really well. I also have a slide here with recommended reading. If you haven't read the book Grit, if you have any time to read, I know some of you are probably running like crazy right now, but if you have a little bit of time at night to decompress and read, this is a wonderful book. It goes through both sports and a number of different kinds of teams and how you actually build the power of passion and perseverance for being able to put one foot in front of the other and get to purposeful goals, okay? So I will give you that. And then Mike, do you want to come in and have a few questions for the panel?
Sure. Thank you all for your questions. I know we won't get to all of them. I want to combine two here. This is, what safety measures have you implemented for your workers? And the second one, in combining, is, and how has your relationship with your employees changed as a result of this crisis? And what changes do you think will continue after the crisis is resolved?
That's good. And Stephanie, why don't you start, because the person who asked about safety measures was specifically gave that question when you were talking, and then we'll open it up. Yeah.
All right. So our safety measures are a little bit different for our office than it is for our field operations, and certainly what we've seen is a massive change in you know, the additional PPE that's required, the opportunities for social distancing on job sites, hand washing stations, and you know, all of those things that allow our employees to work safely. We went remote before the stay-at-home order was issued, but as we're thinking about returning, you know, we're doing all of those things that are required in terms of cleaning and gloves and masks and so forth. But where we saw the biggest change was on job sites, and where there's a lot more PPE. Even now, going out to job sites, sometimes it's hard to discern who are members of the Trice team because everyone's wearing masks. Yeah. And they're getting screened in the mornings in terms of you know, temperature checks and things like that.
Okay, and then David, you talked already about the safely. So let's get into somebody coming in about the people. Bo, you were talking about that. So why don't you answer the second part of that question?
I think it's been really interesting to see how different people respond to the crisis. There are people that have shown up tremendously. We've seen people really lean into and take action. And we've seen some people really struggle being remote and trying to work from home and to move through that. And we've done a lot to try to make sure that there's connectivity and there's community in it for the team. I think ultimately the goal here, both with the team, both with our team members and also with our customers, is that as we go through, it's like you can go through the fire and you either get burned or you get forged. We want to forge the relationships in this time of crisis that are going to be valuable and that are going to be built in the strength and the trust that'll help us afterwards. So I think it's been actually really interesting to open that up. And I think it's challenging as a leader, because in a time like this, we have to be very direct. We have to move things quickly. We also have to have this human touch, because everyone has this underlying anxiety to them. And I think that the more we can embed that human touch in the direct action, the closer those relationships come and the more valuable it'll be afterwards.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything quickly so we can get on to another one? Mike, next question.
Sure. Where does risk assessment fit in your frameworks?
Okay, who wants to talk about risk? Let me just say that there's different kinds of risk. Vanessa, you talked about this interruption risk. So let me just kind of frame two ways of thinking about risk. One of the risks you have is if you're making assumptions and forecasting under uncertainty. So let me show you this right here. Okay, right here. So this is there's a simulation program that you can do at Mass General Hospital that allows you to put in different kinds of scenarios about the assumptions you're making about whether, how many deaths there'll be, how many ventilators will we need, et cetera, how many cases will there be of COVID-19. You can do it state by state, or you can do it nationally. And then you can compare scenarios with one scenario be, what if we kept the lockdown going for this amount of time? What if we let everybody go back to work at this amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. One kind of risk that you have that you always need to be thinking about is, what assumptions am I making about what I think the performance is going to be on any specific outcome that you're measuring? And then if I take the assumption and I say, what's the best case, what's the worst case, how far does that, what's the change, what's the delta? If you see something like this slide, where you have the black dots are the actuals, and then as you go out, the risk gets a lot higher, the further out you get. We call those critical failure factors, and you put a safety net, okay? Where if I'm wrong, if I'm making assumption, but my assumption might be wrong, that's a critical failure factor, and you need to put safety nets under that. So Vanessa talked about the critical failure factors around her supply chain and how she had to put a safety net there, because if anything happened in El Salvador, can we shift it all over to Nicaragua and now do our own contract manufacturing here? Vanessa, do you have anything else, or anybody else want to talk about when you're making assumptions? The other risk is that you are not protecting the interests right now, and you are, what are the things that you need to be really careful about right now? What are the safety measures, the, things that could take you down right away? Okay, so anybody?
I would like to talk a little bit about risk. Everything involves risk, but I believe if we don't risk and we don't fail, we don't learn. But at the same time, I love how you put, Lynda, on the first slide, pretty much not to be reckless. Mm-hmm. So for example, for us, we will bring in new items of food products, but we first listen to our customers, we study the market, and we see what kind of food they want. So we manufacture what they want. We just don't come up with whatever item. We make sure that we understand the need and we solve a problem to our consumers.
Do you use any early adopter consumers or focus groups to try to say, test it out, et cetera, et cetera? We call that experimentation around areas of uncertainty when we're doing something new. That's how we think about risk management. when you're doing something new. So every time I say, can you experiment? Can you do something that in the tech world, they call it minimal viable product? Can I try something out with a small, group of people to see if it works before I start manufacturing and putting a lot of money into it? Yeah, so you do that. David, do you do that? Well, you definitely do that with your tech.
Yes, that's exactly the way we approach Safely Pass. We brought together a large group of stakeholders, union leaders, business owners, supervisors, team members, government officials too, and said, we have this idea, do you think it will help? Then we basically created a minimum viable product within 2 weeks, and then we put it out there. And quite honestly, it's not intended to dazzle anyone. It's like, these are the minimum functionalities that we think we need to empower that monitoring, detection, prevention principles. And that's when we start crowdsourcing what people want and needed. But it's all about, like you mentioned, failing cheap, early and fast. And you iterate on what the feedback is, and the feedback loop is super short.
Yeah. Anybody else, very quickly? And then Mike, do you have one more that we want to get to quickly?
Sure.
Okay, maybe we'll stop here. So Mike, one more.
And this is for Janice. How did you get started with meeting your lawmakers, and what would you do differently if you were starting over?
Good one.
So it was many years ago, the first time we went to call on our congressman, and it was about like soybeans or something, or the price of wheat or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but we got to know him. And then we went back to him, my husband and I went back to him on a different issue. And then I really started seeing that if you use your voice, you can make a difference. And so in the state of Texas, there was a sales tax if you bought a Danish, and if you wanted to eat it in the store and we handed you a fork, we were supposed to charge sales tax for that. But if you put it in the bag and you walked out the door, we didn't. It was just it was stupid. And so I said, I'm going to get this changed because it's ridiculous. And there were some bakers that were getting back taxes on this. And so I joined my trade associations, and they have lobbyists. And this lobbyist for the Texas Retail Association, he got it passed. He worked with me and my Texas legislator, and we got it passed. And so I realized, okay, I call that like my learning in civics, how a bill is passed. And so then I realized, okay, this was really hard to do. I can't even imagine how hard it is when it really matters, okay? And this is why nothing gets passed in Washington. And so from that, I said, you know what, I'm going to get to know all of our lawmakers at every level of government, and I need those people work for us. And so we would, go back and talk to them about things. And then with Hurricane Harvey, we got approved for the SBA disaster loan, and I'm sitting there waiting for this money to come, because our credit card bills, we had to pay $250,000 in credit card bills within 30 days. And so I'm waiting for this money to show up in the bank, and it's not showing up. So I call my lawmaker, the one that we had seen, in 2008 and on, and said, can you help me get this? And they're like, yeah, no problem. And I mean, it was 2 days later that money was in our account. So that is why you need to know your lawmakers. And the other thing is you need to join your trade associations. And this pandemic is the perfect example of why you need to belong to your trade associations. The fingerprints of the Restaurant Association are on the CARES Act, and you see it because they specifically reference the NACE code, the first 2 numbers of the NACE codes for restaurants. So that PPP loan thing, when they sent an email out saying they were going to try to get some kind of business interruption for small business, I said, yeah, in your dreams that'll happen. And sure enough, it did. And so it was NFIB and the Restaurant Association. So if you don't belong to your trade associations, when you get off this call, go find out who they are and send them money, because they're working on your behalf in Washington, D.C. and at the state level.
The key is that you need to have that team and the trust. You need to have those relationships before the crisis, and then you can leverage them. If you don't, it's harder to do. It's not impossible, but it's harder.
And after this call, I have a call with someone in one of the lawmakers' offices. I sent him something yesterday, and he said, let's talk today. So, because he knows me.
Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to Mike and Steve. I would like to thank all of you for coming to for the panelists, for all your insights, and to all of you. Best wishes to everyone for health and safety for you, your family, and your community. And most importantly, best wishes for success as you innovate through this very difficult crisis period, which is novel, which is unique, which we can't say what's going to happen in the future. And but if you're entrepreneurial, you can pass back and cross the field, et cetera, you can make it happen. So thank you. Thank you. And Steve and Mike, do you want to say anything at the end?
Well, this is Steve. Can you hear me okay, Lynda?
I can hear you, Steve. Thank you.
So I'm just going to take about 90 seconds to deliver some real heartfelt thanks. Thanks to you, Lynda, as well as Vanessa, Stephanie, Janice, Bo, and David for being such wonderful navigators. Thanks to Chevron and to FedEx and to Fortune for their sponsorship of the Intercity 100 of the National Conference. Thanks to Mike and V for helping put this all together and for the leadership they show every day. If you're looking for more resources from ICIC, go to icic.org. You'll take a look at the Small Business Resource Center. We've got lots of webinars coming up. Look for the deck in your email over the next 24 hours, which Lynda promised. It's a wonderful deck, lots of things that you can use and translate to your colleagues in your business. And most important, when you get it, take a look at the Intercity 100 information. Think about nominating yourself if you're a rapidly growing company. It's all based on revenue and on job creation this year. And if you don't want to apply yourself, if you're already applied, nominate another small business that you know of that's growing, that's located in an under-resourced community. That's the challenge here. How do we revitalize our under-resourced communities all over the country? That's what we hope to do. That's what ICIC has been doing for 26 years. Thank you all, most of all to the participants. You're doing extraordinary work every day through one of the worst crises of our lifetime. You're doing it with style, with grace, with dignity, with success, and we salute you. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Bye-bye.